So I started playing the piano at a very young age. The more I studied music, the more I began to appreciate music, the more I really learned how to listen to music. And that's really important. The further that went, actually, I learned to find music in very unusual places. And that's kind of the basis of tonight, is finding music in places you don't usually expect. Like a field of sunflowers, for instance. Believe it or not, there are some connections to sunflowers and music. And there are certain patterns you see in sunflowers, and you see some of the same patterns in music. Now, let's kind of back up a little bit here. Music is really comprised of a series of pitches, silence, and time. Notation kind of gives us a basis for that, and it's kind of a code to let us know what music might sound like. However, one thing that I've learned is that you can see other things in nature that kind of give you the same kind of indication of what that music sounds like. This is my dad. He's a musician. He's a really good musician. He plays guitar. He plays the vibes. He has a Latin jazz band, 21 Hottest Latin Jazz Bands, bar mitzvahs, parties, weddings. He's taught me a lot about music over the years, and he's a very, very talented person. One other thing he's taught me is how to play golf. This is me about 50 pounds ago. And what's interesting is as he was teaching me how to play golf and how to perfect my golf swing, he actually used music as an analogy for me learning to keep a consistent swing, a consistent stroke. Speaking of strokes, I was a swimmer in high school. There's me looking good. And one thing my swim coach taught me was to sing a song as I was swimming. This was an easy way for me to kind of keep with the pattern, keep with the flow. We sang Star Spangled Banner underwater. And that's one thing that kind of helped me as I was learning to swim. Snowboarding is another thing I like to do. And if you can kind of find a similarity, a lot of sports and music go together. I began snowboarding a few years ago. I've broken some bones. It's kind of fun. One thing that's really cool is when you hit the bottom of a slope, you look back and you can see this kind of S shape that you create with your snowboard, or skiers if you do the same thing. That S shape kind of shows patterns, kind of like you do in music. Ping pong is also kind of fun. I like doing ping pong. My dad taught me to play ping pong. He's a really cool guy. If you listen to a ping pong match, which you will during the Olympics next week, you'll hear the ball hit the paddle, the table, the paddle again. You can kind of find some cool melodies. I have a built-in instrument in my car. It's my steering wheel, and one thing that's really fun to do is tap it as I listen to the radio. If I'm feeling really adventurous, I'll turn on the signal just to get some more variety in my rhythm. So if you hear me, if you see me driving on a freeway going straight with the signal light on, you know what's going on. Water is really interesting with music as well. As water goes over different textures in the rock and different levels of rock, you can actually hear different sounds. So literally, if you're walking along a creek, you can actually hear varying levels of tones, and you can kind of hear a little melody with a waterfall. Going back to my car, one of my favorite things I like to do in my car is watch people as I'm listening to the radio. And it's kind of like I have my own personal music video that I'm listening to, and you get to see what people do. People do really interesting things. They do a lot of really weird things too, and sometimes it goes in music, sometimes it doesn't. That's just kind of fun. This was taken at Outside Lands last year. And going back to the people thing, crowds they have a mind of their own. And just like you guys all have a mind of your own as a crowd, there's a certain tone, there's a certain sound that crowds create, whether it's a murmur or whether it's an roar or a cheer. Crowds are really interesting to listen to. This is a painting that a friend of mine gave to me for my birthday. It's actually a heart. It's a little bit dark to see. But our human bodies actually keep our own rhythm. And if you're in pretty good shape, your heart beats at about 60 beats per minute. If you're in really great shape, it might be less. If you're like me, it's more like 100 beats per minute. Chewing as a thing that we do with our bodies is also pretty consistent. We kind of have a rhythm when you eat. You typically don't chew out of time unless you're talking. This is a Dusty Bun. I like Dusty Buns a lot. So going back to like the whole human thing, I find it really easy to remember complex equations if you put a song to them. I'll never forget this equation, and this is how it goes. O, x equals negative b plus or minus radical b squared minus 4ac all divided by 2a. Believe it or not, this spiral in the seashell, it actually shows a lot of the same proportions you can find in math. And if you ever put your ear to a seashell, you can hear the ocean, right? A lot of what you see here is actually math, and a lot of it is just numbers. It's a numbers game. It's something called the Fibonacci spiral. It's something that's found in nature, and it's something that we've kind of come to find pleasing to the eye. Something called the golden mean or the golden ratio. If you're an artist or photographer, you probably implement this a lot without even knowing it. That's what makes you so good at what you do. We see it all over nature, and we see it in music too. The same patterns, the same numbers that you find in nature in the Fibonacci sequence or in the golden mean or the golden ratio, you find in music. For instance, the Beatles, Bach, Beethoven, Mozart. A lot of those composers use the same patterns in terms of chord progression and time that you find in music. In fact, if you're drinking a beer, a lot of what you see in a hop, if you look up a picture of a hop, is the same pattern. And in fact, if you play guitar and you like playing harmonics, those harmonics are actually a representation of those same patterns you see in nature. So back to the sunflower, because they're closer up image, you can see a little spiral image. That's the same spiral. And if you find music, certain music appealing to your ear, you can probably thank nature and you can thank the Fibonacci sequence for all that. Thank you.